diseases and things, making them ritually unclean makes them keeps the disease from spreading.
So that's one way we could go with the book. And I think a lot of people take that view. Is there a problem with that view? David?
Then why are we murdering animals that could be used? And why are we, taking the best lamb, the blemishless lamb, and, murdering it? That'd be almost like God wasting it. And why would Aaron's sons have died because they messed up once? That would be protecting them. That would be almost wasting them.
And why would Jesus declare all foods unclean in the New Testament if at the fundamental level this was a health issue? Rachel?
I kind of wonder why it's necessary for us to have all this information, because once Jesus died, it made the sacrifices unnecessary, and yet we have all this really detailed information of how to give the sacrifice.
And it is detailed, isn't it? Do this, then do this. And even when Nadab and Abihu are killed, Moses recognized that they got something out of order, and he kind of reads the right act. And Aaron says, look, my family died today. Would it have been right? And Moses said, well, yeah, you're right. And so it's like, what in the world is that? If we're truthful, so we look at these laws, 5 sacrifices, priestly stuff, death of Nadab and Abihu, God telling Aaron not to cry over it, to finish out the week serving, all this stuff about animals, and then all this weird stuff about human sexuality, where did you pick up in the part about human sexuality that if you're married and you celebrate marital bliss, that you're unclean? Did you pick that up from that? And it's like, okay, now I'm totally confused, because it's like, I don't understand how this is organized. I don't understand what God's getting at. I don't understand why some animals are unclean and some are clean. Tell me your name.
Jacob.
Jacob.
So why is that considered unclean?
Like, what's your question, Jacob? And I think you're asking the right question. How in the world can married sex make you unclean? But does married sex make you unclean according to Leviticus? Yes. And did you pick up the thing about the girl babies versus the boy babies? So if you have a little girl, you're unclean 7 days, and then there's a 33-day uncleanness, and so it's 40 total days. No, I'm sorry, that's if you have a little boy baby. 7 days and 33, but a little girl baby, oh my goodness, then it's doubled. 14 days of initial uncleanness, and then 66 days of the second, so 80 days. So you have a boy baby, you're unclean 40 days. You have a little girl baby, you're unclean 80 days. And you come to that, and Jacob, it's your question, it's like, why in the world would having a little girl make you twice as unclean as having a little boy? That seems strange, does it not? What in the world is going on? So we come to Leviticus and we read that, and without answering those questions, what do we assume about Leviticus? It's unnecessary. You wouldn't say this out loud, would you? But you kind of think it's a little stupid. You kind of think it's a little unfair. You kind of think that it really shouldn't be part of the Bible. That's how we look at it. This may be how God looks at it. So who is God according to the Bible? Is the God of the Bible an interesting person? Is the God of the Bible a charming person? Is the God of the Bible a powerful person? So the person who's supplying the electricity that runs the nerves of your body, who is that according to the Bible? The person who's holding the atoms of the universe together is who according to the Bible? God. Our first parents committed cosmic treason against God. And they chose, instead of the rule of God, the gracious rule of God, they chose the unhealthy rule of Satan. They made themselves children of Satan when they were sons and daughters of God. God looked down from heaven to see if there were any who see God, any who understood. Together they become corrupt. There's none righteous, no, not one. God looks down. Well, don't take my word for it. Let's look at some verses.
It's on the screen. Just
Oh, thank you. I love having the ability to do these videos, but I haven't quite figured out how not to make it so intense. There are a lot of buttons that have to be pushed and a lot of stuff that can go wrong in that. And it does kind of overtax my computer a little bit. Do you remember a long time ago we talked about the meaning of names? And we started off, we talked about the word Abel in Hebrew. Do you remember what we talked about Abel meaning in Hebrew? Does anybody remember that? Nothing, emptiness, vanity. So, I think it's here. It says, behold, the sons of Adam, the B'nai Adam, are Hebel, are nothing, emptiness, vanity, nobody, idols. And the sons of Ish, that may be like cultured man or something. And the sons of a cultured man are a lie. If they went into a balance, they are less than nothing together. So God says, it's not just when I look at individual people that I see flaws. It's when I look at everything I see flaws. That God, this is how Leviticus starts. Do you remember where Exodus ends? Exodus ends, God has pitched a blank. What has he pitched? What has he made? A tabernacle. What does that tabernacle look like? What do the gold, bdellium, onyx, cherubs? It looks like the Garden of Eden. Are you and I inside the Garden of Eden or outside the Garden of Eden? Outside. Leviticus starts, and he called to Moses. So he's inside of the tabernacle, and he calls to Moses. In fact, that's what the name of the book is in Hebrew, and he called. He called to Moses from the tabernacle, And he's basically saying these are the laws of how you get in. Now, is the God of the universe an interesting person? Is he a powerful person? Is he a good person? Is he a person who's been horribly sinned against? Do you get the scandal of God even talking to people like us? We've committed cosmic treason. Our parents committed cosmic treason. And you and I, every single day, affirm the choice of our fallen parents, because when faced with our will versus God's will, well, I won't speak for you, I'll speak for myself. When I come to situations where God's will runs afoul of my will, sometimes I do it God's way, but sometimes I do it my way. So that when faced with this infinite, eternal, unchangeable, omnibenevolent God, there are times when I look at the omnibenevolent God and say, I would just rather do it my own way than your way. If you were God, knowing who you are, and knowing who humanity is, and they said to you, I don't want to do it your way, what as God would you be tempted to say? Okay. You want to be Satan's people? You want to take Satan's rule over my rule? Okay. I'll give you what you want. I'm holding your body together. I'm funding the electricity. I designed your brain. Every pleasure that you've ever had in life has been on my dime. And you don't want, I'm not interesting enough for you to interact with. Okay, fine. Would that be fair for God to say? And is it not that when we come to Leviticus, what we're saying to God is, God, you're not worth me studying this book? You're calling me, you're giving me a path back to the Garden of Eden. And I come to this book and I say, this book is stupid. Your rules are stupid. Your organization is stupid. God, you don't know what you're talking about. And therefore, your word, I mean, God says, my word is like gold. My word makes wise the simple. And humanity comes to the word and says, God, you just don't know what you're talking about. I mean, if God were a hothead, he'd say, fine, just do it your way. How's that working out for you? You know, you rejected my rule in favor of Satan's rule. How's that working out in your culture? How's that working out in your life? How's that working out in your emotion? How's that working out in the kids that you bring into the world? And yet God is so good that he's willing to call to us from Eden and to give us a path back to Eden. And we come to Leviticus, and our first inclination is, God is stupid for having written this book. Maybe that's part of the reason he did it that way. The reason Leviticus is unimportant is because we've so devalued God that studying this book isn't worth what we might get out of it. And that perhaps shows our own sinfulness, does it not? I mean, God, I know you want me to read my Bible, but do you realize how interesting USA Today is? Do you realize how funny memes are? I mean, God, I know you're willing to talk to me, you as the omniscient, omnipowerful, but TV is just so wonderful. And God doesn't reject us. we come to Leviticus and we say the game's not worth a candle. God says it may be worth a candle, you're just maybe not reading it rightly. What do you find interesting in Leviticus, Jack?
So it talks about when you sacrifice a lamb or a sheep or goat, that it has to be slaughtered on the north side of the altar. I could be wrong with this, and please correct me if I am. Isn't the tabernacle door normally pointed towards the east? And if that's true, then Golgotha, the traditional place that we think it is in the north. And so, since Christ
Surely
is our
it couldn't
lamb,
be that elegant. Like where the details actually meant something. Like there was a God who knew the end from the beginning, who like wove. I mean, that's true, isn't it, Jack? I mean, what you're saying, I mean, this is the picture. This is the ESV Study Bible, picture of Jerusalem, I think. There we go. So this is the temple, and this is the back of the temple, and this is the front of the temple. This is east, which would make this north, which would make traditional Golgotha here, which would be the north side of the tabernacle.
north side of the altar.
North side of the altar. Maybe that's just by accident. Or maybe, I remember I was reading through this. It would be really cool if I could find this. WTM. Yeah, so did you pick up, that the offerings kind of go in order, the most kind of expensive to the last. So Mary, when she offers 2 turtle doves for Jesus and her being cleansed at 40 days, oh, you mean Jesus' life started with a 40-day cleansing, just like there was a 40-day appearance at the... Oh, that's interesting. She's offering the second one from the bottom, which shows that they were poor, but they weren't abjectly poor. This is the poorest offering, and it's unleavened loaves. And I remember I was trying to read through the Hebrew Bible once, and I came to these cakes. They're called challah cakes. I can't say it, but Jewish people have an H sound that's really way back in your throat. It's like the back of your throat squeezes a little bit when you say it. English people can't really say it rightly, but that's what these things are. And I was reading through, and I wanted to know what they were. And it says they're ring-shaped bread. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I noticed that it's related to this root, to pierce, to wound, to bore through, to pierce. And I remember I looked up in a Bible dictionary, and sure enough, these little challah cakes have 4 piercings in them. They're called piercelings. If you're too poor to offer anything else, offer the pierceling. You see, we come to Leviticus and we assume that it's just random, meaningless drivel. If we were being honest, that's what we think it is. It's drivel. And it's actually not drivel. There are details over and over and over in the text. And it's because that we so devalue the one God of the universe that we come to his word and we say it's just meaningless. God, just give me the good stuff. You give me a book and it says it will make wise the simple, but God, would you mind, just cutting out the drivel and just giving me the good stuff? Don't we say that to God? And don't we say to God, I know you'll meet with me, but I got stuff to do, and this is what I want, and give me what I want, and I'll talk to you again when I want something else. And this is the God of the universe. This is the most interesting person you'll ever know, ever. This is a person that can do anything that's according to his will. This is a person who knows everything and who is gracious and kind and charming and interesting, whom we insult every second of our lives by devaluing. And God's still loving us. And God's still calling us from the midst of Eden and revealing to us. And it seems to me that the book of Leviticus should be a reminder of not God's failing in writing, but of our incredible sin of devaluing God. And this God is the one who, to get us back to the Garden of Eden, became a human being who lived under his own law. He was circumcised on the 8th day. He offered the 40-day cleansing. He went to the Passover. He appeared 3 times. He offered the tithes for the sole purpose of creating one bride, one woman, whom he would take back into Eden. And somehow that God isn't worth my time. That's what should be astonishing to us about Leviticus. That, I don't know, it reminds me of that when I look at the text. And perhaps Nadab and Abihu shows the flippant attitude toward God. Perhaps, we're all Nadab and Abihu in reality, aren't we? We've been given a great privilege, and yet we are so careless with it that we just come into God's presence. And God is this holy, consuming fire. And he says, if I traveled with you for 1 second and did not restrain my holiness would just burn you up. What else do you find interesting, Jackson?
I could be off on this, but the way that the law makes it sound, anytime you're in the presence of God, you're made unclean, right? So the priest offering sacrifices throughout the day, it seems really ironic because they're told to be holy and to be clean, yet they would constantly be in a state of uncleanness.
By touching death. Yeah. What do you make of that?
I think that it's a picture of we're all unclean all the time. We're all sinners. And so it's not going to be by the works that we do that we're going to be clean. It's going to be by the grace of Christ.
Yeah, Christ who took to himself death. And by being stripped naked, he clothes us. By being made unholy, he makes us holy. By coming out of Eden, he takes us back into the Garden of Eden. who by becoming the seed of the woman obligated himself to be cleansed by the law on the 40th day, obligated himself to be circumcised on the 8th day, obligated himself to offer the Passover, obligated himself to treasure the Word of God in his heart. And then you realize if God did that to me, I really should respond to God in a better way than I do. I mean, that God's interested in me, that God knows my name, that God wants to sit down with me and have coffee. That's what's astonishing. And that God wants to make me righteous and interesting and charming and live forever. And to unify me with other people to the extent that we all can, be this unified person who then interacts with God. I mean, that's what's astonishing, given the fact that we're rebels and treasonous, and we confirm that treason every day of our lives. What else do you find interesting, Chloe?
Along with the death thing, just how touching things that make you dead. Dead things make you clean. Like, I thought about Lazarus and how when Jesus raises him to life, and then he wants those around to, help him out and touch him. But that would be so like, what? You don't touch someone who is just
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you touch something, did you get that in Leviticus? If you touch something dead, you're unclean. Jesus touches dead people and unclean things all the time. So what do you make of that? I mean, maybe he's taking that uncleanness to himself. Or maybe it's like Jesus is saying, well, I've never touched anybody who was dead because when I touch them, they're not dead. When I touch them, they're not sick. When I touch them, they're not leprous. He's the perfect prophet, priest, and king. He's the perfect priest. And then you realize, did you do the thing about the leper? If somebody's a leper, they need to offer 2 gifts. The first gift, do you remember the first gift they're to offer? Because Jesus cross-references this in Mark 1:44. He says, offer the gifts that Moses required for your cleansing. Do you remember what those gifts were? If you're cleansed from leprosy, there was a really weird offering that you were supposed to offer. Do you remember that? It's 2 live, clean birds. And then what do you do with one of those birds? You wring its neck and you let it bleed. In Hebrew, it says into living water. So you get this bloody living water. And then it says take the other bird. And it doesn't matter what your position on baptism, this is going to offend you one way or the other. You take that bird and you immerse it. Now, who's that going to make really, really happy? Baptists. So you take that, you immerse it in the bloody water, and then it goes free. And that's a wonderful picture of baptism, is it not? And then you take the bloody water and you sprinkle it on the cleansed person. And who's that going to make happy? All the ones who do baptism that way. So which one's right? They're both. Do we have one who's bled into living water for us? And when we're immersed in that sacrifice, do we fly free? Oh, and remind me, what do you put in the bloody living water before you immerse? 3 things. Scarlet cord, cedar wood, hyssop. Where does hyssop appear in the Bible? Purge me with hyssop and I'll... Oh, like Passover or something? Okay. Where does the scarlet cord appear in the Bible? Rahab, her house is saved by hanging that scarlet cord. The little baby who's born, one born first, they put the scarlet, and like he's not born and the other one's born. And then the scarlet cord is all through the tabernacle. And why would you put cedar wood? Temple was made out. I wonder if other things were made out of cedar.
Wasn't the cross cedar?
We don't know. But do you see how assuming that those gifts are meaningless may blind us to the fact that they might be meaningful? Once you offer the two birds, do you remember what they do to the leper? They do this really weird thing. They put blood on his earlobe, on his right thumb, on his big toe, right big toe. Does that seem weird to you? Who else did they do that to in the Old Testament? The priest. Huh. It's like they're making a leprous person a priest. Huh. So if you're cleansed from leprosy, you go from being the ultimate outsider to being the ultimate insider. What if Leviticus is this treasure trove museum of God's revelation that we've totally written off? And what if we're wrong and God's right? So we're going to look at the second half of Leviticus, where I may have you reread 17 and read 17 through 27. And it's going to be a bunch of dates and a bunch of... But let's give God the benefit of the doubt and see, is there anything in there that might point to Christ and the beauty of what Christ has done? And that's what we'll talk about on Friday.